years old. Well, sir, don't you know that Cindy's voted in the last 5 elections? Now, that's not an isolated case. You find that all the time. Somehow, someone had registered Cindy. She was a real, living, breathing person, but someone had been voting in her place, in her name, because you don't have to prove who you are to vote in most states. And so you wind up with an explosion of phantom voters. And we found people whose dogs are registered, whose imaginary friends are registered. These are not isolated cases, but they are out there. And they're making enough difference to really disenfranchise you and me in this room when we're casting legitimate votes. We've also, more in recent years, had many precincts where there is 100% plus turnout. So now, instead of low voter turnout, we're seeing that people are taking advantage of these bloated voter rolls, and we're having a lot of places right here in River City, people right here in San Diego County, many precincts in the last election showed a 100% plus voter turnout. We had places across the nation where there were more people voting than there were actual living people in that county. And people go, oh well, and just sort of, well, that bothers me. It bothers me a lot because it really changes elections and it disenfranchises me as a voter. So we need to say, what can we do about that? This law also had a Section 8, terrific protection for you and me. The states have to maintain their voter rolls. What does maintain mean? It means they have to clean out the people who shouldn't be there, that they have to go through them and take out people who have moved, take out people who have been deceased, take out people who maybe have become felons and no longer qualify to vote, all that kind of thing. That's a great protection. However, it kind of backfired in a way with the unintended consequences, especially for states like California. It limited our cleaning out the deadwood. When I first started voting in California, I think the same thing would be same for most of you. If you didn't vote in a presidential election, your name was automatically removed from the voter rolls. And then if you wanted to vote again, you'd have to re-register. That was a really good way of making sure that the voter rolls stayed clean. Because most of the people who didn't show up to vote in a major election would be people who had moved or people who had deceased, and then they were off the rolls. But this law mandated that non-voters had to be kept for 8 election years, unless they were one by one physically challenged with the registrar of voters, then they could be removed. But otherwise, they weren't just regularly removed, and the states don't even have to go through them and attempt to clean them any more often than 8 years. So that actually took, for California anyway, a step backwards there. Then in 2002, another federal law was passed called the Help America Vote Act, HAVA, and it also did a couple of really important things. First of all, it mandated that states maintain a centralized statewide voter roll. Surprised me, all the pieces, to find out that we didn't already have that, right? Just county by county. So the Secretary of State, who's responsible for elections and the integrity and all that stuff, had no way of checking for duplicates. For example, someone registered in 2 or more counties because they moved and didn't get removed from the rolls where they left. And they can't check because they don't have a statewide list. It was just county by county. So this was a very important mandate from this law. Also, the law required states to give provisional ballots. What a protection for you and me. Because clerical error happens, computer glitches happen. And if you were to show up at the polls and find out that for some reason your name is not on that list where you're supposed to vote, prior to this law, you might have been told, gee, I'm sorry, you can't vote. Which would be, a travesty. This law then said, no, at that point you fill out a provisional ballot. And then they will research it in the counting process and see that, oh yeah, your name was removed accidentally. They have hard copies in the Registrar of Voters and whatever. And then you would not be disenfranchised. Very important law. Unfortunately, like all laws, it had unintended consequences that we're battling now. First of all, the non-compliance with that state list. This was a 2002 law. Last time I looked, this is 2012, and I think if my math is correct, that's 10 years. In a computer age, and I apologize to those of you who are much more computer savvy than I am, and I know I'm oversimplifying here, but the bottom line is you take a little disk that has all the voter information from every county. I have the disk for San Diego County. And you just put them all in Sacramento, all 57 of them. from each county, and then you merge them in a supercomputer, and I know it's not quite that simple, but it's almost that simple. It's 10 years later, and California is still not in compliance with that law. We still can't do a decent cleansing job from the centralized location because we have not complied with that law. We have gotten extensions and we have gotten, waivers and that kind of thing, but the bottom line is I can't see any reason why we can't have that list, and 10 years later we still don't. Another unintended consequence is that this allowed for a high potential of illegitimate votes to be counted. Starting in around 2008, we had an explosion of provisional ballot requests, way above and beyond any possibility of the number of errors that could require a person to ask for a provisional ballot. And so we had just tons and tons of provisional ballots being cast in elections, and that causes a problem with counting because we're in this tell me now who won 5 minutes ago, the polls closed, I wanted the answer. So there's a huge pressure on the people counting those votes to get it done fast, and so you have an exploded number of ballots that need extra signature comparison, extra research, and it's overwhelming the system. And so as a result, 85% of provisional ballots nationwide in 2010 were counted. That's way, way bigger than the number of legitimate errors that could possibly exist. And so you have to assume that a large number of those 85% of those ballots were not really legitimate ballots, but they were counted anyway. Then California has added some pretty unique challenges to the whole thing with our own laws. First of all, I don't have time to go into this today, and I wish I did, because our law, we're one of 18 states in the nation that allow anybody who wants it to have a vote by mail ballot, an absentee ballot. Now, there's a real good reason to have absentee ballots when people need them, and that's what California used to be. But now, we in 17 other states just say, no, if you want to vote absentee, because it's easier, more convenient, whatever, go ahead and do it. I have a handout that I hope that you will all get and look at before I leave today. Make sure that you get that in your hands. That summarizes some of the EIP, Election Integrity Project's reasons why absentee ballots are so unsafe for you and me to be casting. They don't guarantee that your vote gets counted accurately. They don't give you privacy of voting. They make you vote before all the evidence is in. There's all kinds of reasons why you should really get off that list if you're on it, and you don't have to be on it. It's really important that you educate yourself on that. And because, according to John Fund, it's the #1 tool for fraud in America. So if we limit the number of people who can have absentee ballots to the people who need them, then we take away that really great vehicle for voter fraud. And I could tell you all kinds of anecdotes about people who are on that list and all the things that have happened with them and their ballot being taken, destroyed, lost, voted in their name, that kind of thing. In addition, California now has online registration, which is one step further back from that accountability. You can just go online and register to vote, and that then gives more temptation to maybe register a voter that might be a phantom voter. And then there's a big push in California for same-day registration, meaning you can go to the Registrar of Voters on Election Day and say, gee, I haven't bothered for the last 2 years to register to vote. I want to do it now so I can vote. So you can register and vote on the same day. It's supposed to be a provisional ballot so they can check and make sure that it's a legitimate application prior to counting it. But as I told you before, that isn't likely to happen. And the nightmare that really bothered me is that in 2010, we had poll observers all over the state who watched people, and this isn't even a law yet in California. Okay, remember, it's still not legal, and yet we had people walk into polling places, not register a voter, but polling places with filled out applications, hand them in and be handed a ballot, and not a provisional ballot, but a same-day ballot, without any check to see whether that application was legitimate. So if that's going on even before it becomes a law, the question is how much more after it becomes a law. So we have to watch out for that as well. So that leads me to who and what is Election Integrity Project. I hope you're convinced with just this tiny, tiny slice of the pie that we really do have a problem that needs addressing in this country and in this state. Our mission statement, and I have a copy of it to give